thing is that I have owned 8 cars in my life, and I've totaled 4 of them. Not all by my own doing, but by other people maybe running into them as they're parked out in front of my house in Woodruff Place when I lived there. We moved shortly after. Tonight I want to tell you the story about how Rollo was born. Rollo was my second car. It was in high school. I'd already had one. When I turned 16, I bought a 1969 Buick Electra 4-door green mammoth party machine. We actually called it the F-Mobile, censored, because it was big enough to F in it. And, sorry, just memories. And so from that, then I got rid of that car and sold it for $750. Pretty good. And then went and bought a Datsun 210, a little hatchback stick that I didn't know how to drive. And so I learned how to drive it as I drove away from the person that I bought it. Sure, I know how to drive this. And got out the door. So the Datsun 210, we called the 210. It did not have a cassette player in it, and so we went to Radio Shack and bought one and put it in so that we could listen to our good 80s cassette tapes. The Datsun 210 had lots of people in it all the time because I was used to having a big car in the Buick Electra that I always had people in my car. So we always had more people in the hatchback and underneath and piled in on each other's seats. I think the most that I ever had in the Datsun 210 were 12. That was fun. 12 all people in the Datsun 210. But it became Rollo, and here's how it happened. I worked at Athletic Attic. Athletic Attic was a shoe store, and I had to get from there to a performance that I was doing my senior year of high school for a brand new high school, Westmore High School in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I had to get there because I was the lead in this one act, and we were performing it for the superintendent of the school system. And I had to be there because I was the lead, but I had to work. And so I was in a hurry, and I got in the Datsun 210, and I put Van Halen's OU812 in the cassette tape and started it up. Hey, they're coming. And started it up and pulled out of Crossroads Mall's parking lot. Now there's 2 ways to get to Westmore High School if you are driving from Crossroads Mall. One is to go straight on 65, not 65, on 35, and one is to go straight on 40. The problem was I wasn't quite sure which would be faster to get to Westmore High School in my Datsun 210. And so I was driving, I got into 5th gear, I was in the far left-hand lane of I-40, thinking, if I go this way and get on Western, I can go up. And at some moment, I thought to myself, I think perhaps this is not as fast as getting on 465. Now, 465 was running underneath I-40, and there was a clover leaf that you had to drive to get around to it. You kind of sloped down and went down. And I thought to myself in the left-hand lane as I was coming up to that cloverleaf, I think I-35 would be faster. And so instead of downshifting and moving over slowly, I just kind of went all the way across traffic. The reason being is it was right there. The exit was right there. And all the time, OU812 from Van Halen was pounding in my ears. All of a sudden, I realized that it had rained at some point during the day while I was working at Crossroads Mall. And I began to turn and realized I'm not going to make this turn into the clover leaf. I somehow will ramp it and go into the apartment building that is right over there. This is not going to happen. So with my hand outside my window and one hand on the steering wheel, because that's the correct way to drive, I grasped, closed my eyes, and began to move into the clover leaf turn. At some point, my front tire hit the curb and jumped my car up. Somehow, it missed my head and landed directly behind me. All the time, OU812 still playing from Van Halen. My car came to a resting place with the driver's side door on the ground. I looked up, felt around, my hand still outside, pulled my hand in, looked, everything was fine, and I heard Sammy Hagar. Feels good! From OU812. So good! And I thought to myself, what the hell are you talking about? This does not feel good. Where am I at? What has just happened? I looked up and saw that the door couldn't open up, so I stood up on my driving door and opened the passenger's door of my Datsun 210. I was maybe an inch shorter, so actually if I kind of put my arms like this, I was outside of my Datsun 210. I opened the door and pulled myself out of my Datsun 210. It was resting, the way that it was resting, it was on a slope. And I climbed out and got onto a tire and began to try and pull the car back over so that I could get in it and drive it to the performance that I had to do for the superintendent of Moore Public Schools of this one-act play called Baby that I was the lead of. As I was pulling on the tires, a gentleman from the highway who had witnessed the whole event said, "You might not want to do that." I said, "What?" And he said, "You're going to pull the car on top of you." Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. He goes, "Are you all right?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Can I help you?" "Could you take me to my house? I've got to get to this play in just a minute. If I'm not there, it can't go on." He got me in his car and we drove off. He took me home. I walked into my parents' house and said, "I'm fine. I've rolled my car. Can you take me to the high school so I can be in this play?" This is what kind of parents I had. My mother said, "Sure," and jumped up and got in the car and put me in it and drove me to the high school. Well, my father then went back to retrieve the Datsun 210, probably still playing Van Halen's OUA12. When they pulled up, there were 3 ambulances, a fire truck, and 3 police cars up on the road of I-35 and I-40, shutting down traffic, beginning to look for the body that had been thrown from the Datsun 210. My dad comes out and says, "Hello, officer, can I help you?" And he says, "Is this your vehicle?" And my dad said, "No, it's my son's vehicle." And he says, "Do you know where your son is?" "Yeah, my son is performing a one-act play at Westmore High School called Baby." "You mean he's not here?" "No. But can I get that Datsun 210 and drive it home?" By this time, they had pushed the car over because they thought maybe I was trapped underneath it in the soft, wet ground from the rain that was earlier that caused the road to be slick when I decided 35 was faster and caused me to skid and hit the curb. He began to take down my father's information saying, "What's your son's name? He'll need to call me tomorrow. I'm sure it's not good for him to have left the scene of an accident." But at about that time, he got a call of a drug dealer in Midwest City that they'd been trying to bust. And all of a sudden he said, "You know what, forget about it. I'm going to get in my car. We're trying to catch this guy. Your son got lucky today." And drove off. By that time, my dad came, saw the play. We went home. The next morning we woke up, the Datsun 210 sitting in my driveway, put a new tire on, drove it to our friend Jim's house, who put a hydraulic jack in the back seat of the car with a 2x4. And pumped up the back. We took the window that had popped out, put it back in with silicone, and I drove it for 2 more years as roller, till I sold it, not for a profit, and bought a 1987 Chrysler LeBaron Turbo Coupe for my uncle that was ranked by Consumer Reports as the worst lemon car to ever buy. But that's another story.